Welcome everybody to the Westend Cultural Center. Tonight we are delighted to have two wonderful performers, all the way from Cambridge, England. He's a poet, a musician, and an inspiration to all, Dr. Malcolm Guite. And of course, two-time Juno Award-winning world traveler, singer-songwriter, storyteller, and Winnipeg's own Steve Bell.
Hello.
Begin the song exactly where you are. Remain within the world of which you're made. Call nothing common in the earth or air. Accept it all and let it be for good. Start with the very breath you breathe in now. This moment's pulse, this rhythm in your blood, and listen to it, ringing soft and low. Stay with the music. Words will come in time. Slow down your breathing. Keep it deep and slow. Become an open singing bowl whose chime is richness rising out of emptiness and timelessness resounding into time. And when the heart is full of quietness, begin the song exactly where you are.
God is everything to me. I myself can do nothing, spare nothing, bear nothing, old weathered woman waiting. Author of the mysteries, ecstasy of blazing suns and swooning moons and these crooning winds and water, earth and fire. Yearning spirit, burning flesh, consummating desire, tossing off the soul's attire, ever I in you and you in me. Mirroring the ancient creche, now absorbed in odd emotion, disturbed and shocked devotion, child of mine, child of eternity. Agony of love divine, send me as a lark ascending, befriending skies attending, ever to the vast and to the still. Infant Christ infleshed in mine, you and I might say something, sing something, kiss something, ever as you would and as you will. God is everything to me. I myself can do nothing, spare nothing, bear nothing, old weathered woman waiting.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I'm quite terrified. There's something very, very nerve-wracking about doing the home show, you know. And this is my first time ever playing at the Westend after all these years, so it's kind of cool to be here.
It's a great venue.
So that's fun. Yeah. And then, of course, the whole point of this concert isn't me. It's because I have my friend here, and I wanted you all to hear him. And I met Malcolm two and a half years ago, 2 years ago, two summers ago. I was in Cambridge singing at the C.S. Lewis Festival out there. And Malcolm was the keynote speaker on the first night. I remember sitting in the cathedral where we were, and he walked on. This guy walked on stage. It's like, what is that? And he gave a lecture, and the minute he opened his mouth, I was spellbound for the next hour. I just never heard anything like it. And so I ended up following him like a puppy dog around the whole conference. And
So I was running around trying to find Steve, say, who's that Steve Bell guy? And meantime, he's going like, who's that Malcolm guy? And we kept, so these messages were, there's somebody looking for you. Oh, yeah, So it was great when we finally connected up. It was good.
Yeah. So anyways, I've been wanting to say this. Please welcome Mr. Malcolm Guite, my friend here. Okay.
Thanks. It's really good to be here. I'm kind of reconnecting with my Canadian teenagehood because I did have a spell of time in Hamilton, Ontario. So I was kind of the lunch bucket city. So I'm gradually kind of reconnecting with Canadian roots. But what I want to do now is read you a poem that really responds in some ways to the power to call on the Trinity that's there in that setting of St. Patrick's breastplate. This is from, I've got a book called Sounding the Seasons, which is a cycle of 70 sonnets. It goes sort of cycling around the church here. And this is the one for Trinity Sunday. That year that I wrote it, the lectionary setting was the creation. It was, in the beginning. So that's where the poem starts. And it goes like this. In the beginning, not in time or space, but in the quick before both space and time. In life, in love, in co-inherent grace, in three in one in three, in rhyme, in music, in the whole creation story, in his own image, his imagination, the triune poet makes us for his glory and makes us each the other's inspiration. He calls us out of darkness, chaos, chance, to improvise a music of our own, to sing the chord that calls us to the dance, 3 notes resounding from a single tone, to sing the end in whom we all begin, our God, beyond, beside us, and within. So it's kind of what we're about here tonight. We're improvising inside the Trinity,
Okay, yeah. Okay.
It's got a billion.
Okay, I'll do this one. This is a song I wrote actually plundering a sonnet of Malcolm's. When I came home from England, I started following his poetry, and I started realizing I'd like to use some of it for songs. And in this one, I took a retreat that winter out at a cabin to work on something, and I went there for 3 or 4 days, and nothing was coming. I just couldn't write for whatever reason. And I get this email from Malcolm on my phone. He had emailed me this sonnet called Epiphany on the Jordan, which is about the baptism of Christ and the revelation that God apparently is not one like a tree is one, but like a forest is one, that God is a unity, a communion. Yeah. And it was just a magnificent poem, and the song came immediately.
It was amazing how quickly the song you're going to hear came back to me. I was like, I wish that would happen every time I put a poem out there. It just comes back better. There's a great line in one of the poems of the late, great Seamus Heaney, wonderful, wonderful poet, great man. He's got a line in his poem about wells and echoes, where he says, others had echoes, gave back your own voice with a clean, new music in it. And that's what I feel like Steve has been doing for me. So I'm going to read you what I sent out to him, and then he can play you what he sent back to me. So the baptism, Epiphany on the Jordan. Beginning here, we glimpse the three in one. The river runs. The clouds are torn apart. The Father speaks. The Spirit and the Son reveal to us the single loving heart that beats behind the being of all things and calls and keeps and kindles us to light. The dove descends. The Spirit soars and sings, "You are beloved. You are my delight." In that swift light and life, as water spills and streams around the man like quickening rain, the voice that made the universe reveals the God in man who makes it new again. He calls us, too, to step into that river, to die and rise and live and love forever. Yes. So, over to you, Steve.
Heaven split and the water spilled and streamed around that man like a quickening rain, a quickening rain. The word behind our world revealed that God in man makes everything new again, new again. This word of God to his beloved settled on me like a dove. He calls us to step into that river, to die and rise to life and love forever. And so graciously extends to me, a sinner, to tread the sacred waters of this mystery of love. What can be said about a mystery, except to say that the last word can never be said, never said. Best leave that to poetry, kindling words for quickening the dead, the living dead. Pure single heart behind all things, each to the other by the Spirit sings. He calls us to step into that river, to die and rise to life and love forever. And so graciously extends to me, a sinner, to tread the sacred waters of this mystery of love. He calls us to step into that river, to die and rise to life and love forever. And so graciously extends to me, a sinner, to tread the sacred waters of this mystery of love. Ooh. Split and the water spilled and streamed around that man like a quickening rain, a quickening rain.
Ah. Okay. I'm going to read you a bit of a cheesy thing. I'm going to read you a sonnet called Westward, which actually finishes the very first poem I read you, the one about beginning the song exactly where you are. That poem is called Singing Bowl. It's got that become an open singing bowl, and that's going to be the title of my next book. And the book starts with a celebration of particular places. There's, just rooted places I know and love, most of them in England. But because I've become aware of just this kind of movement, that first section closes with a poem called Westward. And it's about watching the sunset. And it's just that sense of sunsets and endings. The title, Westward, is a little bit of a kind of touch of my forelock or nod of my cap to one of my great spiritual and literary masters, the poet John Donne, fabulous 16th, early 17th century priest poet, who wrote a great poem called Good Friday, 1613, Riding Westward. So there's a bit of that in here too. Westward. We're looking west to where our setting sun, already out of sight, looks back at us to fling his dying splendors on these clouds. They burn with borrowed gold and crimson, not their own, like strips of silk torn from his royal robe, these flags of hope left by our solar king, who sinks for us below the dark horizon, that he might yet encompass all this globe. He leaves us with the promise of his rising. For all we face the west of his decline, already somewhere else our voices praising, as on the east they glimpse a kindled line. His setting is a herald of the morn. We watch the sunset, but we tread the dawn. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's a dawn treader.
Dawn treader. But, Malcolm, you should do another one, because my songs take 3 or 4 minutes and sonnets take a minute. So maybe you should do 2 to my 1 or something.
Yeah.
But I get asked, because I've been working with his stuff and talking about these beautiful sonnets he writes, and people always ask me, what is a sonnet? Really. And I remember asking him in England. I said, "So what is a sonnet?" And he just looked at me dryly and he said, "Well, it's 14 lines of iambic pentameter." I went, "Oh, thank you. Now I know." So, why don't you give us a little education about this thing that you do called a sonnet?
Yeah. It's a very old form, actually. It's got a long tradition in England, but the English actually borrowed it from Italy. There was a great Italian poet called Petrarch who wrote a sequence of these sonnets. And it has 14 lines, and only 14. You can do lots of other stuff inside your 14 lines, but you know from the moment you start when you're going to finish. And the very fact that it encourages compression, it encourages really soaking each word and each image richly in what it is you have to say. And it's almost as though, William Blake, the poet, had a great phrase about the bounding line, by which he meant the line around an engraving, the boundary. But bounding also has that sense of bounding with energy, abounding. And there's a strange thing that the choice of compression kind of energizes the work. And the pentameter, it's a regular metered poem, and most sonnets have got, as it were, 5 beats to the bar. So just to take a Shakespeare thing for a minute, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. But you notice that Shakespeare is like a cool jazz drummer, basically. He expects you to know that the actual backbeat is da-dum, 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 da-dum. But if you did that all 14 lines, it would just be like writing to a click track. So he actually varies it straight away. He goes, shall I compare thee? Not shall I compare thee, shall I compare thee? Summer's lease hath all too short a date. You see, like he's stretching it out. It's down, down, down. It's like that little riff and fill. So you've got a meter, but then you play with it. I'm going to read you a sonnet now, which is the prologue to my whole book. It's the sonnet about what the rest of the sonnets are about. And sonnets, of course, concentrate things into time. There's a great opening line to a sonnet by Dante Gabriel Rossetti, which is, a sonnet is a moment's monument. I just thought that was a beautiful thing, that, like a single minute of your life, an instant, a particular moment. This is a monument that lasts to it. All of that is true. What I didn't realize until I started recording my own sonnets was that it takes almost exactly 1 minute to read a sonnet. So it's really it's an ancient form of poetry, but it's great for the soundbite age. It's kind of... one of the things that I'm doing in Sounding the Seasons is thinking about time itself and the paradoxes of time and how time takes things away, but actually the loss of one moment opens you up to the next. And most of all, trying to think about how our time in time relates to this eternity. So here's the opener for the whole book. Tangled in time, we go by hints and guesses, turning the wheel of each returning year. But in the midst of failures and successes, we sometimes glimpse the love that casts out fear. Sometimes the heart remembers its own reasons and beats a sanctus as we sing our story, tracing the threads of grace, sounding the seasons that lead at last through time to timeless glory. From the first yearning for a Saviour's birth to the full joy of knowing sins forgiven, we start our journey here on God's good earth to catch an echo of the choirs of heaven. I send these out, returning what was lent, turning to praise each moment's monument. So that's kind of what it's about.
Is Gord Johnson here? Not come? Okay. Okay, then I wrote this song. That's what she gets. So this is no Gord. How many? I know there's a lot of Gord fans here. Can we have a? Yeah. Okay. So, Gord, he's a bit of a mentor of mine. He's a great songwriter, and he wrote this several years ago. But I sort of took it on as a personal lament when I turned 50. It's kind of a lament about getting older. And so the reason I'm thinking about this now is that we partied just a little bit last night, maybe. And so we kind of stayed up a bit late, and we both woke up this morning, and I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, I'm not even 40 anymore, never mind 20 anymore. So, and I've just been, and my folks are here, and so my mom and my dad. But I was in Polo Park the other day, and I'm going up not the other day, about a year ago, going up the escalator, and there's that mirror wall. Right? And as I'm going up, I don't realize it's a mirror wall, and I look over and I see my dad, and I waved. And and he waved at exactly the same time I did. We just saw each other at the same time. It was but I remember getting to the top of that escalator, and I could hardly breathe. It was just like, oh, it's happened, you know. So then we sing depressing songs. This life, there's one thing I've got to say. Cast it all down in refiner's fire, nothing but stubble and hay. Stubble and hay, stubble and hay, nothing but stubble and hay. All I have done while on life's way, nothing but stubble and hay. One marches east, one marches west, one does his worst and one does her best. Meet in the middle, what is their reward? Nothing but stubble and hay. Stubble and hay, stubble and hay, nothing but stubble and hay. All I have done while on life's way, nothing but stubble and hay.
this life, what do I have to say? Remember God in the days of your youth. All else is stubble and hay. Stubble and hay, stubble and hay. Nothing but stubble and hay. Remember God in the days of your youth. All else is stubble and hay. Remember God in the days of your youth. All else is stubble and hay.
Can I borrow the guitar? I've also got a growing old song gracefully, or just gracefully. Here's my cane. Oh, it's in its tune. Yeah. So the story behind this song is, it's always feels a bit strange holding another man's guitar, you know. It's like my own guitar is at home, and I just want my guitar to know that, you know, I'm really thinking about my guitar tonight. In fact, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna, just before with Steve's permission, I do get to play his guitar. I'm gonna read you a poem I wrote for my guitar, okay? This is just so Mike Gibson doesn't, you know. Okay, but I'll say it to Steve's guitar, but it's really for my guitar, you understand? Okay. I lift you lightly. You were made for me. No box of rain to give the grateful dead, but breath instead, and beauty for the living. A certain shaping of the mountain air senses its gentle wood scents through your hollows. The high, dry hallows of Montana first saw you braced and fretted, resonant and ready to be sounded into song. The smallest tremor trembles through your form and turns the air to music. My full heart is poured into your forming emptiness and given back as passion for another. Your hollows hold a weight that sets me free. I lift you lightly. You were made for me. Right. Okay.
How dare you talk to my guitar like that?
Okay. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Like, okay. You know, you've witnessed the exchange of instruments between consenting adults. So, we have a big festival, sort of pre-Glastonbury festival in Cambridge called Strawberry Fair, which is a pretty kind of hippie thing. But I got involved in organizing a church presence there, and we had this big tent that we called, I got us to call the tent Angels Unawares. Not because I thought the church people in the tent giving hospitality at the festival were angels, but I thought the other people coming through the door might be angels. Because I was thinking of that phrase in Hebrews, practice hospitality, for by so doing some have done angels unawares. It was a great day. I was a bit naive about how the festival would be and how it would do it. Like, I organized this thing. I thought, we'll do an outdoor communion and just see, you know. So I called it breaking bread and sharing wine. And I was in like full Anglican robes, you know, with the cassock alb and scepters and stuff. And then I had all these people. But I didn't look weird, you know, in all of that, because everybody else was wearing caftans and beads and stuff. So, you know, actually my liturgical robes were quite sub-fusk, you know. But, so we got in this big circle, and I celebrated communion, and we had a chalice, and we were passing it around. And I became aware, as I was passing this chalice around this circle, I sort of became aware of a counter movement. And I realized that some guy had come up, right, and somebody was passing, and he had a joint, and he just had he thought, oh, like we pass stuff around here. So he passed the joint the other way, and it says, so all my good church people going, okay, spread and wine, you know. So it was interesting. Anyway, at the end of the day, this song came out of it. I want to sing this really for Steve, but also for all. I've just met with incredible hospitality and just amazing people just in this whole thing of coming back to Canada. So, and all of you guys turning up. So this is really for everyone here. It's about how we make each other angels unawares. Some people say that life is just a given thing, but you and I both know by whom it's lent, and that it's right here in the dirt where we've all been loved and heard, that love himself has come to pitch his tent. Sometimes we're in the fields of holy roses, other times we're rolling in the tares, breaking bread, sharing wine. Did I feel your hand touch mine, or did we both touch angels unawares? Abraham is down by the oaks of Mamre, Joseph dreams beside an empty barn, and there's a woman by the well. She got dreams no man can tell, although a broken man might keep her safe from harm. There's somebody else inside my fiery furnace. Jacob gazes up those endless stairs. We are all wounded on the road, but we share each other's load, and we make each other angels unawares. Everybody backs into the future. Everyone is just feeling for it blind. And sometimes we get lost, all the threads of our lives get crossed, but I'm sure glad yours got tangled up with mine. Days gone, I know I should be going. There's barely light enough to say our prayers. But give me leave the while for to turn and to see you smile, and leave to love like angels unawares. Leave to love like angels unawares.
Are you okay?
Gee, thanks, man. See you later. Yeah, there's a famous couplet in a poem by the English poet Andrew Marvell, who says, at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near. And I borrowed those lines, or kind of changed them, for a poem I'll read you now. It's called The Cutting Edge. And I was, maybe it's a sign of age, I was beginning to feel really oppressed by the way in which the words new and latest and right on, the cutting edge or whatever, were being used constantly as an instant term of praise. That if something was only made yesterday, it's got to be better than something, that was sort of made 100 years ago. And I just felt a little bit of a sense against it. And then one time I was listening to this interview on the radio. The interviewer said, I think, was music or something like, your music is really cutting edge, isn't it? And the guy says, yeah, I like to think that I'm right on the cutting edge. And I went, ooh, that sounds painful, I thought, I don't know, where I want to be, but it's not on the cutting edge. And obviously, I have to say, I have another thing, because the whole idea of cutting edges, scissors, shears, all that, I've been avoiding that for a long time, I've got kind of issues about... So anyway, out of that came this poem, which is called The Cutting Edge, and it's a kind of a protest in a way. At my back, like you, I always hear the edge, the cutting edge is coming near. Not the blind fury with the abhorred shears, but this is what I fear. The stealthy scissors of a blinded time, cutting through accretions of the past, dully and daily deleting whatever is not next, sneering and sniping and snipping, excising every signpost from the text, pairing all the parts that point away to something other than our circled self. I know the angels were the first to fall. Cherub and seraph spiraled down in circling curlicues of sacred text, flaring in ink and paper to the floor. The shredded evidence of our affair, our old, embarrassing affair with God. And God himself will follow soon enough, a little word so easy to excise, another snippet for the cutting room, a sweeping on the heap of history. But still, at night, I tiptoe to the door to rustle through these severed strips of love and strew my heart with scraps of poetry, forbidden hopes, and shards of mystery. They rustle through me in my waking dreams, so I'll have a heart, a head, a handful when the scissors come for me. For at my back, like you, I always hear the cutting edge. The edge is coming near.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna sing a fairly new song. This is I wrote this for my Sweet Pea Nancy. Where is she? Out there, Nancy. Okay, there she is. We've been married 31 years.
You got to get that right.
I know. It changes every year, so it's very confusing. So on our 30th anniversary of our first date, right? So this happened a couple Februaries ago, and then we got married 7 months later. We didn't have to. Like it was. It wasn't that good of a date, but it was a fine date, but not that good. And so on the 30th anniversary, I figured I needed to do something. And I'm not a very romantic guy, but I figured if you don't do something on this day, so, and I kind of knew I should probably write a song. And we'd arranged to go out for dinner, and we love dining, and that's been a thing we like to do together. And so we like great foods. And so Nancy, and I found this poem by a guy named Richard Wilbur, who's a poet, and obviously was in love with somebody for quite a long time. And he said this. I thought it was fantastic. He says, "There's a certain scope to that long love, which constant spirits are the keepers of. Though often said to be tame and staid, it's a wild sostenuto of the heart. A passion joined to courtesy and art, like a good fiddle, like a rose scent, a stained glass window, or the firmament." And then I added, like a square dance lady and her square dance gent. It's a long love which constant spirits are the keepers of. Isn't that great? Yeah. Right? So I thought, okay, that's it. That's got to be the core of this song. And so then Nancy on Valentine's Day, she headed out to work, and I knew I had 8 hours to get the song done. And then so I'd sing it to her, and then we'd go out for supper. And so she came back, I remember, and I sang her for it, and her first response is, "I can't believe you got sostenuto into a song." so I was like, that was a good date, by the way.
Well, it's been 30 years of dining with you, love. And we've been feasting on the stuff that life's made of. And we have shared the finest fare, and we have known the cupboards bare, but it's been good, so very good. Do you remember how we promised we'd grow old? Now we have children who have children of their own. Because my musing needs a home, I have found a partial poem I think will do to sing to you. Here it is. There's a certain scope to that long love, which constant spirits are the keepers of. Though often said to be tame and staid, it's a wild sostenuto of the heart. A passion joined a courtesy and art, like a good fiddle, like a rose scent, a stained glass window with a firmament, like a square dance lady and her square dance gent. It's a long love, which constant spirits are the keepers of. And may I say you're still a babe and looking fine. Seems you've been cheating on the ravages of time. And I already rue the day when it's time for me to say so long to you. So long to you. 'Cause there's a certain scope to that long love, which constant spirits are the keepers of. Though often said to be tame and staid, it's a wild sostenuto of the heart, a passion joined a courtesy and art, like a good fiddle, like a rose scent, a stained glass window with a firmament, like a square dance lady and her square dance gent. It's a long love, which constant spirits are the keepers of. A long love, which constant spirits are the keepers of. And I already rue the day when it's time for me to say so long to you. So long to you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The heart of it for me is, trips off everybody's tongue. The great commandments. Jesus is asked, like, what's the hard thing? What's the basic, deepest, most important thing? He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, of your neighbor as yourself. Now, everybody pays attention to the word love, but they don't pay attention to all those alls. All heart, all soul, all strength, all mind. Now, the human mind is not just a calculating machine or something that operates on a purely rational basis. Reason is very important. We can get to truth by reason. But God has endowed us with a profound, mysterious, shaping imagination. And there's certain truth we only come to through that. Shakespeare has a great phrase, of course he has a great phrase in Shakespeare, but it's a bit in one of his plays where someone says, imagination apprehends more than cool reason ever comprehends. Yeah? Now, that's where we need art. Art makes the shapes and sounds and the poems that allow our apprehensions, the things we kind of nearly quite understood but not quite, the glimmerings on the edge, kind of come and make their home in works of art. And we go into works of art, and almost each time we go, we meet a new set of truths and apprehensions. It's very different from a mathematical statement where you go 2 and 2 is 4. I know that, I get it. I don't sort of need to read that again. Whereas I listen to a Steve Bell song again, or I read a poem, again, a little bit more is coming through to me. A little bit more is being drawn out of me. One of my favorite poems of all time is The Divine Comedy by Dante. And as you may know, that it's a kind of epic journey. But it starts with the classic kind of midlife crisis. It begins in the middle of the way of this life. I found myself in a dark wood, I'd lost the way. And it's all about how a guy loses his way, gets set right by a combination of love and poetry, realizes you have to go down before you can get up, and so the story goes on. It's wonderful. So seeing as we're starting again in the middle, I'm going to just begin by reading you. I've written a sequence of poems called On Reading the Commedia, which is kind of like a reader's journal of my experience of going on that epic journey every few years with Dante. So, here you go. And so I start again, here in the middle of a life I scarcely know. How many guesses left to get the riddle? The woods are dark, and darker shadows grow. I followed someone here, but lost her leading, with nothing but my lostness left to show. The voice that drew me on is faint and fading, but something else is creeping up behind. over whose heart, I wonder, are we treading? My shadow beasts consent, though they are blind. All three are here. The leopard, lion, wolf, my kith and kin, the emblems of my kind. They've come to draw me back across the gulf, back from the path I wanted to have chosen. Fall back, they call. You can't run from yourself. Fall to the place where every hope is frozen. But not this time. This time, I choose to choose the other path, path of the dead and risen, to try the hidden heart of things, to let go, loose, to lose myself and find again the voice that called and drew me here, my freeing muse. Begin again, she calls. You have the choice. Little by little, you can travel far. Learn to lament before you can rejoice. Sing to the shadows. Sing and do not fear, but sing them into love. Little by little, begin the song exactly where you are. And so I start again, here in the middle. Okay, over to Steve now.
Give a hand to Mr. Murray Pulver here. And the beautiful Gilles Fournier.
Ancient seer, your vision told of desert highways streaming home to the mountain of the Lord, where nations sound a righteous song forevermore. And on that mountain men will forge from cruel implements of war the tools to till and garden soil. The rose will bloom and faces shine with gladdening oil. And surely it will come to pass. Justice will reign on earth at last. The wolf will lie down with the lamb. No beast destroy, no serpent strike the child's hand. God himself will choose a sign. A frightened woman in her time will bear a son and name him well. God with us, oh come, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do one more before Malcolm comes out. This is one we wrote together in England. Actually, when I first started discovering his poetry, and I started, these songs started coming, right? And then quite a few started coming, and I realized that most of my last album was going to be stealing his things, and I had to eventually phone him and confess, and hope he wouldn't mind, and he was quite thrilled. So I ended up flying over to England and spending 8 days with him working on what became Keening for the Dawn, Christmas CD, which is one of the favorites for me, anyway. So here's the title track.
On and on the night goes on, brooding dark before the dawn. We are waiting. Worried lips rehearse our creeds, bellies swollen with your seed. We are waiting. Hardened shards of broken bread, small consolations in your stead. A soured wine, a tonic for the pain. Dutifully we take our fill, still we long to see your face again. Keening for the dawn as such, stirs the memory of your touch. We are waiting. We are waiting. Feast, shriveling as we all increase. We are waiting. Wearied eyes take in these sights, smarting under tinsel lights. We are waiting. Break the too familiar word, hearing strains we've never heard. A double edge that pierces through the pain. And all that we shall see fulfilled, the dawning day we see your face again. Keening for the dawn as such, stirs the memory of your touch. We are waiting. We are waiting. On and on the night goes on, brooding dark before the dawn. We are waiting. We are waiting.
clap and it will stop. Joe Fournier, Murray Pulver, Winnipeg boys. Let's bring back Malcolm here. We're going to do a little experiment now. Dave had this idea that since Gilles was going to be here anyways, we should do this kind of beat poetry kind of vibe with Gilles laying down a kind of a thing, and so
Yeah.
we're going to just try it.
Also, I just had band envy. You know, I heard these guys playing with him, and I said, "Oh man, I wish I could have those guys backing me." Okay, we're going to do a couple of poems in that. As you know, the beat poets, in San Francisco, just pioneered this fusion with jazz. Did very well. But this poem, our first poem, I'm going to do with you. It's got a really short, snappy title. It's called "On Being Told My Poetry is Found in a Broken Photocopier." Which kind of explains it all. But basically, there's a kind of true story behind it. I was giving some talks, and I was very disorganized and rushing, and I thought, I've just get this bit of photocopying of the handouts done before I go. And I assumed there'd be somebody to help me in the office. And when I got there, was nobody there. It was a very complicated machine with lots of trays and blinking lights, and I wasn't sure what to do. But I thought I'd just basically get how this works. So I put a little bit of poetry in one end of the machine, and I pressed some random buttons and hoped to get a whole lot of poetry out of the other end. But unfortunately, the whole horrible graunching, grinding noise and lights flashing, and the whole thing ground to a halt. And like it was a minute to go before I had to give the lecture, So I just pulled as much poetry as I could out of this mangled machine and went off, And I was kind of sneaking after the lecture, sneaking gingerly past the office, thinking, hope nobody sees me. And this finger shot out, this accusing finger, and this voice said, "Your poetry is jamming my machine." And I went, "That's a great line. Hey, that's iambic pentameter. Your poetry is jamming my machine." I broke the photocopy. So anyway, I confessed, and we managed to. I said I was very sorry, and we got the stuff out. And just as pulling all these mangled bits of poems out of the machine, we straightened them out. And just as I was going and saying sorry, I looked back and I noticed that she was actually crinkling one of the papers and reading a poem. So I thought, oh, good. So I figured she deserved something, so I wrote this poem for her. But we're going to do the jazz version of it now. So I just feel so cool when I have an upright bass behind me. It's kind of all I need is a beret. And,
Yeah, you need a beret,
yeah. 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 My poetry is jamming your machine. It broke the photocopier, I'm to blame. With pictures copied from a world unseen. My poem is in the works, I'm on the scene. We free my verse and I confess my shame. My poetry is jamming your machine. Though you berate me with what might have been, you stop to read a poem just the same. And pictures copied from a world unseen subvert the icons on your mental screen and open windows with a whispered name. My poetry is jamming your machine. For chosen words can change the things they mean and set the once familiar world aflame with pictures copied from a world unseen. The mental props give way on which you lean. The world you see will never be the same. My poetry is jamming your machine with pictures copied from a world unseen. Thanks. Hey, thanks, guys. Actually, what's really funny is that was in a different place from where I am now. I'm in a different college, but I just, how they always have lots of really boring pieces of paper with vague regulations stuck up in the offices where the photocopying machines are. So about 3 years ago, I stuck this poem out just like this. Just put it beside all the other regulation notices. I haven't heard a word, never. I don't know if people have, it's just sat up there. Nobody's ever commented. we mentioned beat poetry and the beats, and I got to meet a very remarkable guy, a poet and writer, biographer, a guy called Jerry Nicosia, who wrote, I think, the great book on Jack Kerouac called Memory Babe. And he's kind of been associated with the beats himself. And he came over to give a talk in Cambridge, and we did a poetry gig together. And he said, oh, if you're in San Francisco, come over or whatever. Probably not thinking that I ever would be. But it so happened I was over on the West Coast, so I wrote to him and said, I'd like to come to San Francisco and see you. He said, that's cool, I'll get you some gigs. He said, meet me at City Lights. That was really exciting for me, City Lights, the birth of beat poetry. And I was so excited I got there earlier. So I thought, well, I'll just go and hang out in a bar for a bit first. And I knew that Vesuvio's was a place where Jack Kerouac used to go. So I went and sat in Vesuvio's just to calm down before I met this guy. And somebody started staring at me, and really staring at me, and I'm looking around, I thought, golly, what's going to happen next? And finally this guy leans over and says, I know you. And I said, oh, really? And he said, you're that post-beat Brit bard. I said, what? And he pointed to a poster. Like, I know California is where people go to reinvent themselves, but I didn't realize you could be reinvented by somebody else, before you even got there. Because on the poster was a picture of me off of the web, and it said, post-beat Brit bard, one night only, And I was thinking, post-beat? It's like, I write rather delicately wrought sonnets in the 17th century manner, kind of. Anyway, I had a magical time, and we did several gigs there, and I got a tour of San Francisco with the guy that wrote the book, as it were. Anyway, this poem came out of it for me. It's called Cloud Hidden. I flew to San Francisco. I took the rainbow bus, further into otherness, further into us, further into ecstasy, further into pain, further than those acid tests and all this acid rain. I climbed the stairs in City Lights. I tried the poet's chair. My verses formed a golden gate that shimmered in midair. My verses formed a bridge between those Dharma days and mine, suspended between heaven and earth, tense in every line. So Snyder breathes the mountain air where mountains walk alone. Ferlinghetti's breathing still, though Ginsberg is long gone. His chants are still vibrating beyond his final bow. He howls a hipster sanctus with the hidden angels now. And Cassidy is everywhere. Garcia's in my head. I'm grateful just to be alive, to hear the Grateful Dead. I read with Nicosia, read the faces and the streets. I beat these pavements with the man who chronicled the beats. We touch St. Peter and St. Paul, where Jack and Neil both prayed. And Dante's writing on the wall says all that can be said. Tonight we read in Berkeley. Tomorrow in North Beach, we'll harmonize with mermaids still singing each to each. The skyline writes an epitaph with every vapor trail, while Jerry sings his elegies for every vet in jail. And after, in Vesuvio's, we'll drink a few for Jack, while Tom says to fare forward and Van sings Take Me Back. I try to read the glimmer, the strange pearlescent light that graces San Francisco skies and presages the night. And I find myself cloud hidden where rhythms never stop, cloud hidden with the poets on the foggy mountain top. Thanks.
Give a hand again for Murray and for Gilles.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
How about those guys, eh? In the audience tonight is somebody who painted the most fantastic painting called Saying the Names, in which she took a photo of me that someone had done, a lady, great photographer, a lady called Lancia Smith, and she then took my poem And she took all the lines of the poem and just spread them out around like they were flowing out of my head and they were flowing over the wind and swirling into the sea. And it was not only totally captured the spirit of the poem, but it's like, it's a picture of me on the inside, not the outside. And the really thing that's blowing my mind now is she's giving me this painting. So she's giving it to me. So I am going to be leaving Canada, bringing this thing back. So this one goes out to Faye, who I think is here, and she did an amazing job with this. So, saying the names. Dawn over Amble, and along the coast, light on the tide flows to Northumberland. Silvers the scales of herring, freshly caught and gleaming in their boxes on the dock. Shivers the rainbow sheen on drops of diesel, and lights at last the North Sea fishing fleet. Tucked into harbour here, their buoyant lines lift to the light on plated prows their names, the ancient names picked out in this year's paint. Providence, Bold Venture, Star Divine are first along the quay. Fruitful Bough has stemmed the tides to bring her harvest in. Orcadian Mist and Sacred Heart aspire. Their names are numinous, a found poem. Those Bible-burnished phrases live and lift into the brightening tide of morning light and beg to be recited, chanted out, for names are incantations, mysteries made manifest like ships on the horizon. Eastward, their long line tapers towards dawn and ends at last with freedom, radiant morn.
Yes. Listen, thank you so very, very much for coming out tonight, and just thank you for letting me introduce my friend to you. It was so give a hand to Mr. Malcolm Guite.
Thank you.
Why don't you set this up?
Okay, I'd written a poem which I thought was finished, and sometimes you need an external prompt, you need someone. I'd written a short poem called Descent in a particular meter, which has a short line at the end of each of, after three longer lines, it's called English suffix. And Steve had seen it, and he started to make this incredible song out of it. And then he calls me and says, we need to work on this together. And I realized he was serious. It's like, I'm flying over to England. If you can give me 3 days, we'll just do it. So he shows up and he says, oh, by the way, that poem Descent's really good, but I need it to be twice as long. I need another 3 verses. And I thought it was done, but we talked about it, and I suddenly saw unfolding out of it really what should have been there, and how he was going to do it in 2 pairs. And I went down to my little hut. I have a little hut at the bottom of the garden, which is my sort of trysting place with the muse. It's called the Temple of Peace, more in hope than expectation, but, it's kind of, And really amazingly, these 3 verses came sort of quite quickly, and I brought them back to Steve, and then Steve did this amazing thing with, he really transformed it.
Okay, we'll end with this one.
They sought to soar into the skies, those classic gods of high renown. For lofty pride aspires to rise, but you came down. Lofty pride aspires to rise, but you came down. You dropped down from the mountain sheer, forsook the eagle for the dove. The other gods demanded fear, but you gave love. The other gods demanded fear, but you gave love. Ooh, ooh.
Where chiseled marble seemed to freeze their abstract and perfected form, compassion brought you to your knees. Your blood was warm. They called for blood in sacrifice, and victims on their altars bled. When no one else could pay the price, you died instead.
when no one else could pay the price, you died instead. They towered above our mortal plane, dismissed this restless flesh with scorn, aloof from birth and death and pain, but you were born. Aloof from birth and death and pain, but you were born. Born to these burdens, born by all, born with us all, astride the grave, weak to be with us when we fall, and strong to save.
Weak to be with us when we fall, and strong to save.